Hello! We're going to talk about writer's notebooks today, as well as the herky-jerky recursive writing process. We'll get to the writing process in a little bit, but first I want us to talk about writer's notebooks and why, what kind of tool they can be used as. They're a wonderful tool for us as writers ourselves, but also for us to use with our students and to encourage our students to keep writer's notebooks. We really want to talk about why it's important for teachers to be writers. Katie Woodray has a really nice quote. She talks about, we may not have a novel in our future, but we do have students in our future. And so what she's saying is, you know what, even though we might not have a goal of writing for publication or even writing for other people to read, we still have students in our future, and it still really helps us and them if we have a sense of what writing is all about. So what she suggests that we do is that we keep our own writer's notebooks, that we really practice leading a wide awake life ourselves. So a writer's notebook, when we think about it, it's a lot like an artist's sketchbook. An artist who is sketching often has that book with them, or has a piece of paper, or might be standing in the grocery store line and is waiting for a while and takes out a notebook or something and starts doing some sketching. Maybe because the flowers that the person in front of them is buying catches their eye or something like that. But we want to do that ourselves. We want to practice leading a wide awake life so that we are aware of all the things that are going on around us and looking for little tidbits that might make for a bigger story, or that just might lead to, for curiosity for us. Katie Woodray also talks about the need for us to draft, revise, and edit pieces. I think this is just a really huge part. We can talk to our students about what it's like to draft. We can talk to them about how we want to use voice, how the tone, how organization, all of those things are important. But really, when we have tried the process ourselves and gone through the drafting and the revising and then the editing piece, and kind of had a sense of what it's all about, what it entails, we are just that much of a better teacher when we can speak from our own experiences. She talks also about keeping a writing file. So just keeping a drawer or just even a little manila folder or something like that that has all kinds of writing in it, whether it's grocery lists, whether it's a letter to your mom, an email, maybe it's a letter to the editor, maybe it's just a note for one of your kids, any kinds of things like that. So kind of keep a writing file so that that's a place where you can draw from. Later on, we'll talk about using our own writing as models for our students and going with mini lessons, going through our writing and thinking about how we can model a process for them using our own writing. So if you have a writing file, that's a really nice thing to have. I know the other night when I was digging through my office at home looking for my writer's notebooks, I have a whole file cabinet drawer full of notebooks and full of different kinds of writing. It was really cool because I found a journal I was keeping when our oldest, who was almost 17, was 4 years old, and it was all about her emergent literacy. And I shared it with her last night, and we were both just laughing over things. It's something I had totally forgotten I had, but at the time I was hoping to write an article about emergent literacy. Never happened, but it certainly was a highlight for us to be reading through those together last night. We want to also celebrate our writing. So just be proud of yourself. Give yourself a pat on the back. Think about all the things that you're doing well with your writing. Don't just focus on how hard writing is. I have a really good friend who is a professor in the communication disorders department, and we were working on an article last fall. And she hates writing, absolutely hates it. Well, I really enjoy writing, but together we actually weren't that much of a good team because, she knows exactly what an article needs to look like and things like that. And I am just restarting academia and writing for publication. And so it was funny because even though she hates writing, she was doing a much better job with the writing and making it sound the way it should versus my writing. And so I remember talking to her and saying, Sarah, look how great this is. And she's just like, no. And I said, yes, it is. You need to reread it and look at it with different eyes and just have a sense of how good your writing is. And so do celebrate your own writing. I think that's really just an important thing for us to think about. The next slide is again from Katie Woodray, and it's just, again, talks about teacher as writer. As we write, the key is that we understand that writing is personal. And so sometimes the things that we write, we don't want anybody else to read or to see. We don't want to do any sharing with it. We need to respect that with our students as well. Sometimes writing ourselves helps us experience writing process in a true way. Think about if you are writing a really important speech. I think about my sister when my grandma died. She had a lot that she wanted to say at grandma's funeral, and it was beautiful. But she really had to experience the writing process. She took her ideas, and then she went ahead and made the draft, and then she went back, took some ideas out, added more ideas, and so on until she went through the whole writing process until she had a sense of this is really how I want to say it and what I want to say. It's true to who I am. And so I think that's an important thing for us to do is to experience that writing process. We can help our students buy into writing more readily. If they see us as writers, then they are probably more excited about writing. Or see, you know what, maybe is something I'll be using my whole life, not just for school. We can also teach the strategies more meaningfully. And I think this is a really important one because we can use our own writing to talk about how we can improve our own writing or how we can look through our writing and notice the things that we did well and emulate it in another piece of writing. So we can teach strategies for writing a little bit more meaningfully. Okay, so writer's notebooks. So I hope I have convinced you about how important it is for you to be a writer. Now with writer's notebooks, that's a tool that we're going to use throughout this semester to help you feel like a writer. And maybe you're already doing this, maybe not. I already alluded to the fact that a writer's notebook is much like an artist's sketchbook. It's a tool for collecting and storing thoughts, your ideas, your wonderings, quotes, etc. And a writer's notebook might look different at different times in your life. When I first started a writer's notebook, it was back in, I want to say 1995. And we didn't have any children yet. We were married, but we had just moved to Grand Forks, and we had a dog. My notebook at that time was filled with a lot of different things. But a lot of my writings, my collections, were about the dog and the kind of silly things that she was doing at that time. It's kind of nice to look back on it now because she died in 2001. And so it's kind of nice to look back and see my thinking and the crazy things that she did. But so in 1995, my notebook was all about my dog. I have another notebook that I was working on and writing in during the time my grandpa was dying of cancer. And so a lot of those entries have to do with grandpa and different memories of grandma and grandpa and the things that they were doing. The Dashet Hound-like ceramic saltine cracker holder that we loved, and we knew we could only get 3 crackers out of there at a time and things like that. So at that point, there was a lot of that. Now, when the kids were born, there were a lot of quotes from the kids, a lot of the silly things that they said, like one term that they still use all the time is scrumbly hair, which I have no idea where that came from. That would be Sophie. She was talking about her preschool teacher's curly hair, and she called it scrumbly. So now whenever we see someone with really, really curly hair, we call it scrumbly. But so it's just a quote. And the thing is, if I had not written these things down in my notebook, I don't know that I would be remembering them. And so I think that's kind of a neat thing too. It's a way for us to collect and store those thoughts. So think about your notebook that way. It helps us to lead a wide awake life and to notice the happenings around us. And with that in mind, it's important that you choose a notebook that is portable, so it's not too bulky. You can carry it around so that at any point you can take it out and write something down in it. I remember a couple of years ago I was walking to the Union, and in North Dakota, if you've never been here, we have, when the sun is shining in the winter, the skies are absolutely beautiful. And the way the sky was the way the blue and the sunlight was shining by the red brick of the buildings, it reminded me so much of Sedona. And I remember just stopping and looking at it, and a woman walked by, and I said, "Look at that, isn't it beautiful?" And she stopped and looked too, and we both were like, "Wow." And then she said, "Thank you so much," and kept going and kept walking. Well, the neat thing about that is, again, I don't know that I would remember that, except for the fact that when I got to the Union and got my cup of coffee, I took out my notebook and I wrote it down. So think about that. It helps us to lead a wide awake life. We are looking for things that are memorable. We're listening to people a little bit better, a little bit more closely, all of those kinds of things. So keep that in mind. All right, the next slide talks about ways to use your notebook. And I've talked about a few of these, but the thing is, you don't need to think about a notebook like a journal. A journal has some of your deepest, darkest thoughts and your secrets, and it might be something that you have a friend that you have talked to that if something happens to you, she knows to get to your house before she does anything else and take those journals and throw them in the garbage. Journals are different. A notebook is something that doesn't have to be narrative, doesn't have to be, really deep. It can have a variety of different things. I do have a picture within this lesson where I talk about the different different kinds of things that you might put in there. And in it, you'll see that I might have paper clippings from the newspaper. I might have other things like lists. I might have just plain old images. I might have bits and pieces of conversations, things like that. The one I want to talk about is a trigger entry. A trigger entry is something where, you may do this. You might read something, and what you read might trigger a memory or something in you that you want to write about. And so it might be that. A trigger entry can also happen if we are sharing our journal and something that someone else, we're sharing our notebooks and something that someone else says triggers a memory for us. And so then we put it in our notebook and write about it. It might be plans for a future project, any of those things. The key is, as we model the writing process, we're going to draw from our own experiences. So we're going to take our notebook and we might say, this is something I've done that you might try. And you might share an entry that you've done. You might demonstrate how a seed, one little bit or one little excerpt of your notebook actually went into a published piece. It developed into something larger. A piece from my very first notebook, it was when I was walking around in the winter when I was taking the dog for a walk, and I noticed all the wreaths and brown wreaths and dead wreaths that were still hanging on people's doors, and I thought, why? We spend so much time decorating for Christmas, why don't we take it down? And it ended up being, I did a whole research paper on Christmas decorations and what they mean for people based on that little entry. We can also think about our notebooks. We can use co-teachers. We can look at those authors that we know and love and think about them as we're thinking. Some of our favorite books, some of our favorite picture books and things like that. We can try and emulate some of their writing within our own notebook. Okay, the next part is going to talk about the writing process, but I'm going to actually have to start a new webcast type thing. So I'm going to stop here, and I hope that you have a much clearer understanding of writer's notebooks. There are a couple of articles you're going to also read that I think will even help you have a better understanding. All right, so we'll stop here.